Welcome everyone to the first StakeHound Ask Me Anything session. This is Albert Castellana, CEO of StakeHound, and I will be here every week with a conversation with an industry leader to discuss the state of the industry, staking, and DeFi. StakeHound brings staking and DeFi together so that you no longer have to choose between securing your loved networks and earning from staking, or using your tokens on DeFi to make more money. Thanks to StakeHound, you'll be able to trade one-to-one representations of any proof-of-stake token on Uniswap or borrow against them on tools like Aave or Cream. Today with us is one of my dearest friends and ex-boss, Piers Ridyard, who's one of the people that first saw the value of StakeHound and has been helping us all the way to make sure that this became a reality. Thank you, Piers, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Albert.
Great. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and Radix, please?
Sure. So I am the CEO of Radix. I've been the CEO of Radix for 3 years, basically, where I joined at the peak of the 2017 crypto boom. I've been in crypto since before the Ethereum launch, just before the Ethereum launch, and sort of got hooked on it as soon as I saw what you could kind of do with smart contracts and like allowing people to create things like decentralized autonomous organizations was probably the first thing that got me really excited. Got really excited about the possibilities for insurance and how you could potentially solve some of the world's problems with things like crop insurance and stuff like that I thought was really exciting, but like completely impossible to do when Ethereum first started because there was no stable value tokens. And there was and the scalability wasn't sufficient, and there was lots of things that were wrong with it, which sort of led me down this path of eventually finding Radix and falling in love with Dan's technology and getting involved there. Before that, I have like a really strange history of doing lots of different things. I worked in investment banking a little bit. I worked in corporate law a little bit, or at least trained to be a lawyer. I did Chinese in business. I went out to China and I set up sort of like a manufacturing line for a company, a consumer electronics company I founded. Sort of along the way, it's sort of been all of these bits and pieces like finance and law and technology that eventually I sort of felt like I found my spot with crypto. And I've been just enjoying it so much since.
That's great. Awesome. So what's Radix? Like, what is it about?
So Radix is the decentralized finance protocol. It is a protocol designed specifically, it's the first layer 1 protocol designed specifically to address the problems that DeFi has and also bring decentralized finance into the mainstream. Fundamentally, we think that decentralized finance will take over mainstream finance, or that they will merge into the same thing. I think there's it's often difficult to define exactly what you mean by decentralized finance, but for me it's sort of categorized very much by this seamless ability to move assets between products and services created by lots of competing people, which ultimately means better liquidity, better products, better consumer experiences. And we're very much at the start of that. But Radix, there are a lot of problems to solve. So we saw the problem with scalability, and we saw how people were solving that, like Polkadot and Cosmos and Ethereum 2.0. And we saw pretty early on that was fundamentally going to break DeFi. So all of these layer 1s are going out and they're sort of they're positioning themselves as general purpose technology, or asking people to do things like parachains and stuff like that. But fundamentally, the thing that makes DeFi amazing is this ability to compose together lots of applications. So in 2017, the problem was user to application, i.e. how many transactions per second could I do into an application. Now it's how many transactions per second can I do between applications, and no layer 1 apart from Radix is actually architected for that idea, like scaling into application communication. That's fundamentally what Radix was designed and built for. And then there's like a whole host of other things like security and the way you build and incentivizing developers that we think is really important as well. And then looking at this from the point of view of an ecosystem of liquidity and like what that means for how you make design decisions in your protocol.
Very interesting. Could you tell us a bit more about like what you said about how to incentivize developers and kind of where you see like what are the different type of DeFi applications that you see being built on Radix?
Sure. So this sort of goes back to, I suppose, watching how the industry has developed, watching how Ethereum developed in the early days, actually being like part of that community, and sort of being super inspired by how people were inspired and what they were doing, and then looking at how other communities developed or tried to be developed, like around things like Hashgraph or EOS or any of these projects that got like a lot of funding, but like have sort of singularly failed to sort of inspire developers and inspire people to want to be part of the mission. And I think that that this comes back to like how developers and how people want to build around an ecosystem. So we realized that at the early stages of any ecosystem, a lot of the things that are important is things like libraries and tooling, right? It's not going, oh, I want to get this big project to come and build on here, because they're going to find it really difficult. It's going to be a really big lift because there isn't the tooling and the libraries available. It's taken Solidity years and years to get to the point where people can feel comfortable to even do things like an ERC20 issuance, which is insane. And so it's the early developers who come in and help, not by creating massive projects, but by creating the little bits and components that actually mean that massive projects can come along. Like things like Aave and Compound and even Uniswap wouldn't exist without things like Open Zeppelin and with the sort of the standards that were created in the early days. So we realized that this is a financial ledger. So if someone creates a great piece of code that is then used by multiple applications, there's no reason that you can't allow like royalties to flow back to the people who created that. There's no reason you can't create a self-incentivizing system of developers who can be like, yeah, I don't want to build, Uniswap, I don't want to build Aave, but I've got a great idea for how to make a more efficient continuous function market maker function. I've got a great idea for how to make a pools and shares sort of like function. And so we call these components, and anyone can come and build these components and they can deploy them on top of the Radix platform. And then if they're called by a subsequent project that comes along and builds something on top of Radix, then those developers can end up getting royalties as a result of that, which means that by focusing in on application area, specifically decentralized finance, what you're doing, you are narrowing the number of different things of like industry types that can be built on top of the platform, but you're substantially deepening the maturity and the complexity of things that can be built using the tools, because you're honing in the marketplace that you want to develop, you want to naturally create around the things that are important to you to be able to be built on top of your platform.
Very interesting. The monetization of open source in DeFi, at least.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Very interesting.
And like, it's sort of like taking ideas of Git and taking ideas of open source and taking ideas of like how we've seen communities develop and kind of like mashing them together and being like, well, this is money. There's money. There's fundamentally a ledger for money. There's fundamentally a ledger for tracking components through and tracking dependencies and all that kind of stuff. Like, put it all on Ledger and make this into a rich developer environment that just hasn't really existed before.
Yeah, I mean, making all these different pieces, building blocks like composable, really helps, in securing the networks, on improving liquidity for the different assets, and making sure, like, the security aspect of this is critical, right? Like, we see all these different components being built on Ethereum that, if they are not audited, they can have anything inside, and most of the users don't know how to do that. So yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah, and for me, that's even like one level down, right? Is how the programming how the programming language and the virtual machine sort of like is represented in the system. Like, Ethereum gives you this black box. It is a virtual machine, which means it's running independently, right? It's just you instantiate your virtual machine and you have your code inside your virtual machine, which, and when it's something like Solidity, like you end up having a bad programming language that's not really fit for purpose for financial applications, and then you're forcing those financial applications to interact between VMs in a way that is also like has lots of possibilities for hacks and exploits and all this kind of stuff. Whereas the Radix approach is, well, let's make the execution environment non-Turing complete. Like the development environment can be, but when you actually know what states you want the smart contract to be in, we use something called finite state machines, or and a programming methodology called functional programming, which basically means you're declaring the state something can be in rather than the logic by which it transitions between the states. This massively reduces the number of ways in which you can have bugs and errors and exploits that happen as a result of these Turing complete VM environments. And actually it's just borrowing, like we're not inventing something new here. We're just borrowing from the best practices of building high criticality systems. Like this kind of programming has been around for a very long time, very well established in finance, very well established in sort of high criticality fields. And we're just being like, that's how it should be. But with these components, what ends up happening is you abstract this away from the day-to-day developer. You actually make the day-to-day developer's job so much simpler because they're just able to pull from this rich library of already created, highly secure components to be able to use their like code Legos to put together like sophisticated financial products in a much more secure but much faster way.
Okay, very interesting. So since we get off topic, right? Like Radix is a proof of stake system, right? Could you explain a bit about that? And like my question would be, do you think that proof of stake will be competing with DeFi?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So you know, like proof of stake is like a I always think of proof of stake as this incredibly important social construct for security, right? And the problem, like it has gamed incentives, and I'll talk about what proof of stake is, but like it has gamed incentives in it, and then if those gamed incentives break if there's like a more fun game to play with the same assets. And I think that this is like a problem that DeFi is currently facing, and Ethereum is going to be facing in a massive way when people are like, well, do I want to use my ETH for this or DeFi? But so are other platforms as well. So proof of stake is a security mechanism for public permissionless networks, and it's preventing something called Sybil. So like proof of stake is not a consensus mechanism, which a lot of people often confuse. Like they talk about the proof of work consensus mechanism for Bitcoin, for example. It's a Sybil prevention mechanism. There is a consensus mechanism that exists. A lot of them are things like, you know, PBFT or something like that is a well-known one. Like Radix has its own consensus mechanism, Cerberus, but that's just how the nodes agree between each other, like which transaction is correct. And it doesn't matter like from the point of view of which one came first. It just matters that they agree, right? I have 3 nodes, they all saw a different thing. How do they come to an agreement that they all agree that A is the transaction that is going to be, you know, committed and not B or C. The proof of stake is there to prevent people from just arbitrarily adding nodes to increase the number of votes that they have in the system. So it fundamentally protects the system from sort of anonymous malicious actors. But if you want your system to be permissionless, then you need some kind of gating mechanism. You need to make it like you need to make having a vote have some kind of economic cost, so that you can make sure that you basically increase your security threshold. You make it more and more expensive to hack the network. And a simple way of doing that is proof of stake. Like if you want to run consensus, cool, but you've got to buy some tokens, you got to lock them up, and then if you're a naughty boy, then your stake gets slashed. And this puts this economic incentive of, well, I want to secure the network, so I want to put some value against it so that my vote counts, but also to make it expensive for other people to come in and buy votes and have more votes than other people in the network. But I also want to make sure that if people are bad, that they lose that stake.
Mm-hmm.
So that why would anyone do that? And the answer is incentives. Like, you get paid to do it, and you get paid in the crypto of the platform. And like, this was great when people were going, oh, I can get a 12% APR yield or a 15% or 20% APR yield on my staking if I take these tokens and I lock them to the network. I'm a good member of the community. I want to see the network seed. I want to see it secure. And I'm also getting paid for it. But then things like DeFi come along, and holy crap, like, I can get 2000% APR for my assets. And it's exciting, and I get to like lean into a community and play around and all that kind of stuff. So I think there is inherently this conflict between the two. And we went with a proof of stake model because we think it's a fantastically efficient way of creating security on a network, and I think that's why a lot of networks have chosen to go down that route. But I do think that there is going to be this capital cost calculation that people are continually making about, well, should I lock up my tokens to secure the network, and should I go and get involved in DeFi? It doesn't apply to everyone, right? And like, there's plenty of people who want the networks to exist and to be secure, and that's their primary objective. And DeFi for them is just not something that they want to play in. But there's definitely a Venn diagram of people for whom that represents a real sort of cost benefit that they struggle with.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I mean, that's kind of essentially one of the primary reasons why we thought of StakeHound when we were doing like different like skunk work, design sprints and stuff like that, just trying to figure out like how, what actually makes sense for layer one solutions to actually get adopted, right? Could you tell us, so we've seen like some people in the community are asking like, like what's the relationship between Radix and StakeHound? Like how did the idea come about? Like, how do you see StakeHound impacting Radix when Radix is live, I guess, when both are live?
So I think that fundamentally, StakeHound is a component of the ecosystem that's really important. There's sort of like multiple levels to it. The first is this sort of like security versus opportunity cost problem that is emerging in networks that I think StakeHound is a really elegant way of solving. I can support the security of a network I care about, and at the same time be able to access the different financial products and services that exist on top of the network. And as Radix is a decentralized finance specific network, like that problem is going to be, as apparent as it is in something like Ethereum. So for us, it was like, this is a way of making sure that we don't end up in a situation where we're forcing sort of the community, members of the community, parts of the community, that to necessarily choose between the two. And actually, we hope that it'll end up increasing the security of the network overall, because it's sort of a no-brainer to do both. But then there's the wider thing of, there's $25 billion of tokens that is currently locked in staking. Many of them actually locked out of the DeFi ecosystem as well, because they don't exist on Ethereum and they don't exist on Radix. Here's a fantastic way of unlocking that value and allowing it to flow into Ethereum and into other ecosystems. And for us, this is this great opportunity of what we see as being liquidity bridges between ecosystems. Like, we are very confident that building, deploying, and using decentralized finance in Radix is going to be 100 times better than doing it within Ethereum. But that's not the only thing that drives DeFi ecosystems. There's also this huge element of liquidity, and so driving liquidity into Ethereum, but in a way where the liquidity can easily move from Ethereum to Radix and back again, such that, you know, these better products and services are only limited by their ability to be able to receive the liquidity and receive the user base that is necessary for them to function in a way that can be competitive or can be cooperative with the Ethereum ecosystem. Then these kind of projects like StakeHound represent this huge opportunity to do multiple things. So help security of layer 1 protocols, help the ecosystem as a whole, increase total liquidity, increase addressable market, increase assets under management, and also provide opportunities for liquidity to move between ecosystems that are building themselves close to things like Ethereum, and in this case, Radix.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So what do you think, like, what do you think, for you at least personally, is going to be the primary use case for something like a staked XRD?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's a number of things that we really like that sort of go around collateral. Being able to do things like create a stable coin, something like MakerDAO, right, is a collateralized debt obligation, which allows you to take one asset, not limit your exposure to it, not reduce your exposure to it, but then get something else that allows you to then go on and either spend it or you know, use it in a different financial product, in a different decentralized finance application. That's really exciting because it allows you to essentially create your own quasi deposit scheme where you're both securing a network and also able to keep putting your capital to work. I think that's all very, very exciting. I think from the point of view of things like Aave and Compound and Uniswap, all of these are sort of interesting and exciting. I think that from the point of view of liquidity, it shouldn't massively improve the liquidity provision, like continuous function market makers being able to provide staked tokens into pools to increase the liquidity overall of the token is a really interesting and exciting area. The greater the liquidity is, the better the products and services that can be built on it, the more kind of extra applications can be opened up. And everything's sort of linked to this concept of liquidity. Like, you can't get onto something like Aave or Compound without sufficient liquidity of the underlying token. You can't, you don't represent a good pair to be exchanged against on things like Uniswap unless you have good liquidity of the underlying token pair. And then further to that, you know, the things that are coming down the road with stuff like futures and perpetual futures and all of these sort of like new financial and DeFi products that we don't know are going to exist yet. They all also sort of fundamentally trade on this underlying concept of token and collateral liquidity. So I think that's the kind of thing that I would like to see this being used for as much as possible within the ecosystems.
Yeah, liquidity is for sure one of the key components here. At the same time, I think like what we're seeing right now on DeFi and degenerate finance as well, which is like, you know, why don't you yield farm, you know, pizza, pasta, and like sushi and yams, and right? I think that when we have actual assets, you know, like actual assets that are securing networks, then that space will become much more solid, right? And that actually will obviously improve liquidity on every single asset that's like integrated with this, right? So you're going to be able to, well, yeah, instead of, you know, farming with yams, you're going to be able to farm with staked XRD, right? So I think that that's going to for sure improve liquidity much more.
Right, and I hope we'll bring some modicum of sanity long term to these kind of products as well, because fundamentally with a staked token, you are earning for securing a network. Like the payout is actually being supported by a fundamental value that is being provided and is being paid for as a result of that fundamental value. I think that sort of changes the topic somewhat. And I think there is like this very high levered, high risk area of DeFi that's going to continue for a while. But there is this opportunity for there to be, I'd say, the safer end of the market, where you aren't just creating tokens from thin air for nothing. You are actually providing an underlying service to a network that requires that underlying service, and as a result is paying the true economic cost of that. And I think that's really interesting and fascinating for the long term of DeFi as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I think we've come to an end with this session on the first StakeHound Ask Me Anything. Thank you very much, Piers, for joining us today. Please remember to like and subscribe this channel, to join the future conversations. And remember that Piers will be joining our Telegram group for a short Ask Me Anything session as well on text for the next few minutes. And well, I hope to see you there and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Albert.
All right, bye.